Greeting. Good evening, everybody. In case there's someone that I haven't met before, my name is Elizabeth Sandridge. I'm Director of College Counseling at St. Thomas More. I want to thank everyone for taking time out of their evening to come to this virtual presentation hosted by the Louisiana Education Loan Authority. We are super, super lucky to have Leela in our state to help with FAFSA, financial aid completion, and college access. Most of the time, if y'all ask me any questions about the FAFSA, I am asking Leela that question to make sure I am correct. So they've been a great resource for us at St. Thomas More. Just a couple of housekeeping things before I pass it over to Miss Ann Carmichael, who'll be doing our presentation. This is getting recorded, so we will be sending it out and more on the way once I have the video recording, so you'll be able to refer back to it as you and your family are working on the FAFSA. As some of you may know, I am leaving on maternity leave very soon. My doctor has given me an official date, so my last day for the fall semester is going to be October 17th, which is pretty crazy to think about how soon that is. But when I do leave for maternity leave, Coach Ben Mouton is taking over all things college. So students will still have someone that they can ask questions directly to, work with, and he will be working with the universities to make sure transcripts are getting turned in, rec letters, all that kind of good stuff. So he's been working really hard this summer, getting prepared and organized, so he can take over that role. So if y'all need anything while I'm out, he will be your direct point of contact. And as always, you can always contact Miss Struther, and she'll be able to help with anything that you might need. I'm now going to turn the floor over to Miss Ann Carmichael, who will walk us through this presentation. Miss Carmichael?
Thank you so much for inviting me again to present this year. This is the time of year where everyone is making their plans for college. Congratulations, you're almost there, so keep up the great work. But tonight I want to talk to you about the college financial aid process, so you won't feel like you're in the dark once things really start moving along. We all know that you're checking your college websites for those potential colleges that you're interested in, and it's important to note their tuition. However, there are a lot of other fees and expenses to consider. So make sure that you're doing your homework and making a plan. There are dollars available to help students complete their college education. Federal Student Aid offers the federal Pell Grant and the Federal Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant. These are both need-based grants for students who do show extraordinary need. There are service grants for students whose parents may have died in the military after 9/11, or for those who have died in the line of duty, such as police officers, firemen, etc. And then there's a Teach grant, which of course is for students who plan to teach once they graduate and teach in the classroom. In addition, there are federal work-study jobs available on all campuses across the country. These jobs are administered by the financial aid office at your college, and there are great opportunity for you to get some on-the-job experience. They look wonderful on your first professional resume, so please consider these. Now, remember that you do have to approach the financial aid office once you have been admitted, and you can inquire about any positions that they might have available. Student loans. Nobody wants to talk about student loans, and we don't want you to have to borrow either. But if you need money to complete your education, they are a good investment. Federal Student Aid offers the direct subsidized loan, which is a need-based loan for students who need to meet that cost of attendance. Interest does not accrue on this subsidized loan while the student is in school, but once he graduates or ceases to attend, the loan will go into repayment. With the unsubsidized loan, basically everybody is eligible for this type of loan, but interest is going to be accruing while the student is in school. We encourage students and families to pay their quarterly interest if they have this type of loan, so that once you graduate, that interest is not capitalized and added to your principal amount borrowed, because that way you're paying interest on that interest. Parents can borrow on behalf of their students as well if they choose to. And of course, there is a PLUS loan for graduate students. All of these monies can be used at 2- and 4-year colleges, at community colleges or technical schools, for online accredited courses, and then, of course, for graduate school. Why would you complete a FAFSA? The FAFSA is your application for the federal student aid that I just mentioned. It also serves as your TOPS application. So if you meet all the requirements for your scholarship that you've worked so hard for, once you complete the FAFSA, the TOPS office is notified that you have done so, and that will serve as your application. Of course, as I mentioned, you would be eligible for the federal Pell Grant by completing your FAFSA, federal work study, federal student loans, but also the Louisiana Go Grant and other private scholarships and grants. U.S. citizens and nationals are eligible to complete a FAFSA. Also, those with a green card, an arrival departure record, those with battered immigrant status, and anyone with a T visa is eligible for federal student aid. You'll want to begin the FAFSA process by gathering all of the documentation that you're going to need to complete the form, and that will really expedite it. You'll want to gather your Social Security cards if you're a U.S. citizen or national, and your permanent resident cards if you fall into a different category. You'll want your 2024 federal income tax returns and W-2s. And then you'll want to have a copy of any bank statements or brokerage statements that you might have, investment statements, because you will be asked to provide the balance of those accounts as of the date you submit the FAFSA. You will begin by creating a federal student aid ID. So every student needs to create his ID. The web address is here down at the bottom. The student will be asked a series of questions about themselves, and they'll also be asked to identify themselves in 2 fashions. 2 of these 3. So you can verify yourself via email, mobile phone, and or an authenticator app. Once the student has his ID, he'll want to go to the FAFSA website here at studentaid.gov. Now remember, you're the class of 2026. You're applying for aid, for federal student aid, during the 26-27 academic year. So make sure you are starting the 26-27 FAFSA. You, as the student, will log in with your username and password, the FSA ID that we just mentioned, and then you'll identify your role. In this case, we're going to assume that this is the student. The student will be asked information about himself, but before that happens, he will have to provide consent and approval to have the IRS transfer his tax information from 2024 and drop it into the FAFSA. This is now a requirement. So to be eligible for federal student aid, you do have to provide consent to let FAFSA check on your IRS data. Hopefully, you will be successful in importing that information. But if you do have trouble, don't panic. grab your documentation that we mentioned earlier, and you can enter these fields manually. The student will be asked about his personal circumstances, his marital status, his college or career school plans. And I know that many of you have taken AP courses. Perhaps you've participated in dual enrollment. Maybe you'll clip out of some courses, and that's fantastic. Good for you. However, for federal student aid purposes, they're interested in knowing if you've participated in the federal student aid program before. If if you haven't, you'll want to report that you are a first-year freshman. The student will be asked to consider this list of statements. If a student can answer yes to just one of these statements, then he will be considered an independent student. Let's quickly go over a few of the most important. Will a student have children or other people that he's going to be providing more than half of their financial support during the period between June 2026 and June 2027? At any time since the student turned 13, was he an orphan, a ward of the court, in foster care? Was he an emancipated minor? Or is he in legal guardianship? And it's important to note that there is a difference between legal guardianship and legal custody. If you find yourself in one of these situations, you will need to make sure that you have that legal document with you because the financial aid office will have to verify your situation. Or is the student homeless or at risk of being homeless? Now, maybe you can't answer yes to one of those prior questions, but you're not quite sure about your situation. Maybe you cannot get in contact with your parents, and you feel like you have some unusual circumstances. You can state yes, but this puts you into an appeal process, and you will work directly with the financial aid office to go over those circumstances. What are some unusual circumstances? Perhaps the student was estranged from their parents or has been abandoned but never adopted. The student could have left home due to an abusive situation. Maybe his parents are incarcerated. Maybe the student has been granted refugee or asylee status or is the victim of human trafficking. Those are all considered unusual circumstances, and you will report those to the financial aid office, and you can skip over the parent portion of the FAFSA. But what are some circumstances that are not considered unusual? Let's say your parents tell you that they don't claim you on their tax returns, so they don't want to report. And that's not the case. For this purpose, for the FAFSA purpose, you will ask contributors to report information, and that it has to be the contributor that the parent, legal parent, that has provided you with the most financial support in the past 12 months. Maybe the students don't live with their parents and they totally support themselves. That is still not an unusual circumstance. You will still need parental information. Also, maybe parents don't want to provide their information, and that's their choice. However, remind them that you will not be considered for any of the free monies that are available through federal student aid. You will only be offered the unsubsidized federal student loan. As I mentioned, if you do have an unusual circumstance, it is your responsibility to contact your financial aid office and let them know what that is, and you will begin to provide them with the information they need to document you as an independent student. All others are going to be considered dependent. This question has caused some questions in the past. Is a student interested in the direct unsubsidized loan only. This means you do not want them to consider you for the Pell Grant, FSEOG, any service grants, or the subsidized student loan. So we encourage you all to say no. You are not interested in the unsubsidized loan only. The student will move into the demographics section where he will report his sex, his race and ethnicity, and citizenship. He will want to report his parents' education status. Why is that? Because there could be additional support or resources for you if you're a first generation college student. So if neither of your parents attended college, be sure to report that so you can get additional support on your college campus. Were the student's parents killed in the line of duty? If so, he will want to report yes here. That could provide him with some additional financial aid in the form of the service grant. And then he'll report his high school completion status. Next, he'll move on to the financial section. Now, most seniors in high school will not have a big portfolio, but you still will be asked to consider these questions and answer them appropriately. If the student did complete a tax return in 2024, he'll want to grab that and report his tax filing status. All other questions have been answered with that IRS data transfer. So this student will not have to go through the manual entry, but he will have to report the balance of his savings and checking accounts and add any cash he might have on hand to fill in that field. Does the student have investments? If so, he needs to report the current net worth of those investments, including real estate, but not his family home. Does he have businesses, farms, or fisheries? If so, he'll want to report the current net worth of those businesses and farms. But let me go back to this question. And I'll go more over this in the parents section because the parents will be asked this as well. But just to reinforce this, if an individual, any contributor, whether it's the parent or the student, has a business with 100 or fewer employees, he does not report the current net value of that business. If the parent or student owns a business or a farm or a fishery, and he lives there, that's considered his family home. So he again does not have to report the current net worth of that investment. Next, students will begin to build the list of colleges that they want their FAFSA data to be sent to, because federal student aid is not going to just send out your information to every school around the country. You have to give them permission to do so. So be working on that now. You want to add all of the colleges that you're considering. You can add up to 20 at a time. And if you plan to apply to more than 20 colleges, you will submit your FAFSA with the first 20. You will wait until it's processed. Once your FAFSA has been processed, then you will go in, remove those 20, and add the next 20. Now the student is going to be led through a series of questions to determine who his parent contributor is or contributors. And as I mentioned, you'll be walked through the process so that there's no chance of making an error in identifying your contributor. However, let's briefly talk about who those contributors might be. If your legal parents were never married, you're going to select the parent who provided you with the most financial support in the past 12 months, and that parent only. If your parents are unmarried, but they do live together in the same household, both parents must report. If your parents are married and live together, then of course both will be contributors to your FAFSA. If this, if your legal parents are divorced or widowed and have remarried, then you want to report your legal parent that's surviving. And if he has married again, then you will have to include your step parents' information. And then lastly, if your parents are divorced or separated, the parent who provided you with the most financial support in the past 12 months should be listed as your contributor. You will be asked to provide the email of that individual. So make sure you're checking with mom and dad to get their email address. Then you'll send the invite. And you can see here that the invite has been sent and they have provided you with a link to the FAFSA itself for the contributor to complete. Now you see that there's an invitation code here. You can either use the link that you receive via email or you can type in the invitation code. So now we've gotten to the end of the student section of the FAFSA. You can see that all of the sections are complete, and you can drop down each of these sections to see what questions you were asked and make sure that those answers are correct. You can also see here on this pop-up that your contributor invitation has been sent, and you can see the email that has been sent to. Now it's time for the student to sign his FAFSA. He will state by signing this agreement that he's providing information to the best of his knowledge. He'll receive notification that his FAFSA is pending, and he'll be shown again who his contributor is. If you find at this point that you would like to change that contributor or you need to update the email address, you can do so here by managing your invitations. There's a wealth of information within the FAFSA and the pop-ups that you'll see once you submit so that you can take a look at exactly what your responsibilities are now. The parent, in the meantime, has received an invitation to contribute to the student's FAFSA, and they're told exactly why and how to do so. The parent contributor will create a federal student aid ID at the same website in the same manner that the student did, and he'll enter his username and password to log in. He can add his invitation code and then agree to have the IRS drop his tax info from 2024 into the FAFSA itself. If a parent refuses to consent at this point, which is his choice, remember, the student will only be offered federal unsubsidized student loans. Hopefully, you're successful in importing, but if you're not, that's fine. There's a lot of help for you. We're happy to work with you directly if you need assistance in manually completing your FAFSA. The parent will be moved first to the parent demographic section, where he will list his marital status at the current time, his state of residence, and the date that he became a resident of that state, and then move into the financial section, which looks almost exactly like the student financial section. However, the parent is asked to report any federal benefit programs that he has participated in during the 24 and 25 fiscal years. He will be asked about his tax filing status, and he will be given the opportunity to adjust his family size. And you might ask why, because they've already pulled the information down from the IRS, which shows your dependents. However, a lot can happen between 2024 and perhaps 2026 if you don't complete your FAFSA until that point. So make sure you are looking at the amount, the number of dependents that show on your tax return, and you can manually update that. Report the number of students that you have in that you will have in college this next academic year. And it looks here like this parent was unable to transfer his data from the IRS. So this is a sort of snapshot of the manual questions that you will be asked to report. Don't panic. There's a lot of resources here. They will tell you exactly what line to pull from your tax return. If you don't quite understand, maybe you don't know what AmeriCorps benefits are, there is a lot of information in drop-down boxes within the form itself to tell you exactly what they need you to report. Or you can contact us and we'll be happy to walk you through it. The parent contributor, which is, of course, the parent that provided you with the most financial support, must report on the FAFSA how much annual child support he received in the last most recent full fiscal or calendar year. So if you're completing now in 2025, you will go back to 2024 and tally up all of the child support that you received during that period. Now, this is not what you were mandated to receive. It is exactly what you received. Parents will report their assets by listing their savings and checking account balances and adding any cash that they might have on hand. The parents must then report the current net worth of any investments, including real estate investments, but not their family home. And remember that current net worth is the value of your property minus any debt you might owe on that property. And that is the amount that you will enter here. Next, you will enter the current net worth of any businesses or farms, but not businesses that have less than 100 or fewer that have 100 or fewer employees. You also will not report the current net worth of any farms or fisheries that serve as your family home. Parents will report their spouse's information. And then it's time for the parents to sign and submit the FAFSA. So look over all of the questions you were asked and your answers to each before you sign, making sure that the financial aid office has the most accurate information for you. And then the parent will receive a pop-up congratulating them on completing the FAFSA. And in the meantime, the student has received an email telling him that his FAFSA is actually complete. It takes 3 to 5 days for the FAFSA, for federal student aid to process the FAFSA. Once they do, they will email the student a link to his FAFSA submission summary. And this is a very important document you'll want to retain. You'll see the date and that the form was received, the date they processed it, and a data release number. And this number is interesting because if you need to make a FAFSA correction, you've already been accepted to a college and they're working on your financial aid offer, but you need to make a quick change to your FAFSA, or the college may contact you and say, we need you to update this section. You can actually give them this data release number and they can go in and make those corrections for you. You'll receive your estimated federal student aid offer. This is not your final offer. This is just federal student aid taking the answers that the questions and answers that you provided to them and giving the financial aid offices a recommendation on what they believe you might receive. However, the financial aid office at your college will be the one to provide you with your financial aid offer. And then another important item you're going to find on your FAFSA submission summary is your student aid index. This is the magic number. It's a formula. It's not a dollar amount that is calculated by federal student aid, and the financial aid administrators will use this formula to determine your aid on their campuses. A lot of scholarships are determined upon your student aid index, so make sure you're retaining this information. This is what your FAFSA summary will look like. And this is your opportunity to make any changes that you might need to make. You can always go back in and correct your FAFSA. You'll be shown a list of the schools that you sent your FAFSA to. So if you are wondering, oh, I wonder if I sent that to Loyola, you can pull your FAFSA submission summary and find out for yourself. You'll also see a lot of great information about each of the colleges that you've listed on the FAFSA. What is their graduation rate, their average annual cost, etc. And there's a plethora of information about your next steps. I would read over every document that you can get your hands on that comes from federal student aid that's sent directly to you, just to make yourself educated enough to be able to work through this financial aid process. Now, your FAFSA has been submitted and it's been processed and sent to your colleges. What happens next? The colleges will review the information federal student aid has sent over about you, and they will begin to work on a financial aid offer for you using that information. So what they're trying to do is calculate your net price, and the net price is what you're going to be responsible for paying for that academic year that you're applying for. They will need to determine your cost of attendance on their campus. Your cost of attendance is not going to be the same as everyone else's. Some people are living on campus, some people will have a meal plan, others are staying home and saving that money. So the financial aid office has to determine what your cost of attendance is. They will begin looking for any grants or scholarships that they can offer you to attend their college, and then provide you with your net price. Every college should send you a financial aid offer, and I will note that they'll usually wait until you've been accepted for admission to their school. So go ahead and get those admissions applications completed so the financial aid office can pull down your FAFSA data and be working on your financial aid offer. They won't all look as uniform as this, but they will all show your total cost of attendance and should show it line itemed. Any grants or scholarships that they are offering you will be listed as well. And then some student loans. If you have not saved that amount of money that will cover your net price, then you may need to borrow for your education. Your federal work study job may be listed on here. Remember, you are responsible for contacting them to request information about jobs available. And then if they know of any outside scholarships, they will list those there. You'll want to take all of your financial aid offers and make a chart. What's important to you? Is it price? This is a really simple way to determine your best choice. But once you have decided on a college, you always want to accept your financial aid offer in this order. Accept any grants or scholarships, which are free money that doesn't have to be repaid. Next, you will want to participate in federal work study if you can. This is money that you'll be earning and you do not have to repay it. And then your last resort will be student loans. If you decide to accept a student loan, make sure you're doing your homework. Make sure you know what the federal rates are, what private commercial lenders will charge you in interest rates and fees, and what nonprofits will offer. Leela does administer a nonprofit education loan product called Leela Choice, and you can see here that our interest rates are even lower than the federal rates. We charge no fee to originate your loan, so please take a look at all of your options before you're making your decision. Speaking of money, we want to make sure that you are getting all of that free money, and that includes private and outside scholarships. So make sure you're checking with your parents to see if their companies might contribute to their children's education in the form of scholarships. Perhaps you belong to a social club. Of course, your college counselor is your best resource for all scholarships. We all send our scholarship applications to your counselor, so make sure you're checking with her. Leela is offering two scholarship opportunities this year. This is a monthly scholarship. So if you're planning to complete your FAFSA or you have already completed it, you can use this QR code to apply for a $1,000 scholarship now. This is a random drawing. Names will stay in our database throughout their senior year, so they will have many opportunities to win. We also offer a $1,000 scholarship by random drawing for those who are going to stay in our state and attend a college in the state of Louisiana. Our FAFSA completion guide should be delivered. They should have been delivered this week. If you've not received your copy, please feel free to contact me and I'll be happy to send one over to you. And this is the time that I usually tell everybody to participate in the early release beta program, but the FAFSA is now live, so I need to remove this slide. We offer a senior checklist for college planning with lots of resources and links to scholarships and other resources. And we've sectioned this off on a month-to-month basis to give you a little break, but give you a few things to plan for. As we mentioned earlier, my name is Ann Carmichael. I work for Leela. We're right down the road from you in Baton Rouge. If you have any questions, I would encourage you to email me directly. If you decide to start your FAFSA on your own, but you may have a little bit of uh, a hiccup and you want to ask a quick question, call our FAFSA helpline. But if you want to schedule a free virtual FAFSA session via Google Meet, we're happy to stay online with you as you complete your entire FAFSA. You'll use this QR code to request that appointment. This goes directly to our calendar, and you can see what is available at a time and on a date that's convenient for you. So if you have any questions, I will ask you to put them in the chat box. And I see our chat box is pretty full.
Yeah, I was about to say, Miss Ann, I started kind of keeping a running tab of questions that were getting asked repeatedly. Would you like me just to hit those for you?
Yes, please.
Okay. So parents who have multiple children in college, do they need to make a new FSA ID or are they using the same FSA ID?
Great question. Your FSA ID is yours for life. So you will want to go in before you begin contributing to your new students' FAFSA to make sure that all the information is accurate. But to answer your question, you will use the same FSA ID for all your children and even for yourself if you go back to college.
If there are students who have never filed taxes or don't have any IRS data, how do they fill out that first section?
They will agree to have the IRS check on that for them, and then the IRS will report to federal student aid through your FAFSA if you have or have not. They also need to know that you have not completed a tax return in 2024. So it's kind of seamless to you, but in the background, they'll be working through those details.
What if a student has a 529 account? Where do they report that?
That is a fantastic question. If the account is owned by the student or the parent, he will report that in the student section of the income and assets. So in that investment section where they want to know your current net worth of your assets or investments, that is considered an investment, and that's where you will add that information. Now, for parents, if you have individual retirement accounts, any accounts that you might have that you are using for retirement purposes, you do not report those assets. Only education assets are reported in the FAFSA.
What about UTMAs?
I would encourage you to get started, take a look in the asset section, and they will strictly line item everything that should be reported and every investment that should not.
Can you repeat the information about small businesses with less than 100 employees and if that applies to farm and fishing investments?
If you live on the farm or the fishery, it's considered your family home, and you do not report the current net value of that farm or fishery. If it's a farm or fishery that's an investment, that is not considered your family home. Therefore, you do have to provide the net value of that asset. Now, for businesses, if you have a business with less than 100 employees, let me repeat that, with 100 or fewer employees, then you do not have to report the current net value of that asset. Now, any income that's coming in from those farms or fisheries or businesses with 100 or fewer employees, that's all going to be reported as income in the income section of your FAFSA. All that will be pulled in from the IRS to reflect your income from 2024.
There's some clarifying questions about the 529s. Can you repeat, like, if the student owns it and if the parent owns it, what the options are?
If the 529 is in the student's name, then you will report that as an asset in the um, current net value of, trying to think how it's worded, current net value of investments. You will have to report your education investments there in the student section of the FAFSA. And I would be happy if you want to email me directly. I would be happy to go into, I have a long list of which assets are to be reported and which assets are not. We just never have enough time during our sessions, but I'm happy to provide you with that list.
And then for married couples, do they both need to fill out and have an FSA ID or can they do it together?
That's another great question. If the parents are married or they're not married, but they're living together so that they both have to contribute, if they filed jointly, then they will only need one data transfer. So they will ask you about that other spouse, but if he filed with you on your 24 tax return, he does not need to link to the IRS and pull in his tax information. So the FSA ID sort of is your link to the IRS. If it's one income tax return, we only need one FSA ID. But if you filed married separately, they will ask you those series of questions and they will get to the point that both parents will have to create an FSA ID to pull in all that income from 2024. Now, I want to go back and clarify something about the 529 question. This year, the FAFSA was changed to reflect only the assets of a 529 that are owned by the parent or the student. If a 529, like a start account in our state, is owned by the grandparent, that asset does not have to be reported. which I thought was
Oh,
very interesting.
oh,
So, grandparents, start saving.
Yeah, I will say I have asked my mom to open my 529 for
That's very smart.
For those parents that have been asking about private scholarships, kind of like how Miss Ann referenced in her slides, just as a reminder, all of that information is listed inside of your student's score account in their drive section. So we have several scholarships listed in there. One that we've been really pushing for students is the Catholic Daughters Scholarship. That's $1,000 for a one-time $1,000 reward for students that a lot of our St. Thomas More students are eligible for, and that is outside my office door that they can grab and fill out that application. And then we also, all of the resources that Miss Carmichael listed, the FAFSA completion guide, the checklist, they're all listed in the score drive. So as parents in the score account, in your score account, when you look at your students' information, you can see that drive and you can find all of those resources as well. Another question about 529s came in. So if we put 529s in current total of cash, savings, and checking accounts.
That is for liquid assets like your checking, savings, um, money market accounts, those type of accounts that you could quickly liquidate will be listed as an asset in the cash savings and checking account section. However, your 529 is an asset. So that very next question will ask you the current net value of your assets. That's where you will enter the balance of your 529. But I know this can get complicated and confusing, and I hate to advise somebody not really knowing what your situation is. So please feel free to schedule an appointment or call in or email me directly, and we can begin a conversation about your specific situation.
Any other last minute questions from anybody? I haven't seen any. So just couple of last minute reminders. We will be sending this presentation out when we get it and more on the way. Students, the seniors have been coming in our office pretty consistently and frequently, so all of them should be wrapping up their applications and getting those submitted. And once they do that, we definitely encourage y'all to finish the FAFSA as quickly as possible. So that way, if there is any holdups or question marks, you'll have more time to resolve them and it'll be quicker you'll have more time to resolve them and it'll be easier to kind of get that done. And then if y'all need anything starting the week of October, um, October 20th, it'll go directly to Ben Mouton. So starting October 20th, all college questions are going to go directly to Coach Ben Mouton. And then when I come back in January, I'll be picking up again and helping finalize enrollment and all that kind of good stuff with your senior class. But we want to thank Miss Ann so much for all of her knowledge and always being there to help support the students of St. Thomas More. We will be sending out and more on the way this week links for the checklist, the FAFSA completion guide, and the virtual appointments again. So that way y'all can have that if as you're filling it out, you want to check in with her, or if you want to write down her email address on the screen. Again, if y'all ask me a question about the FAFSA, I'm calling her to ask the question too. So if you want to skip me, I completely understand and go straight to her. And then once we get the recording, we'll send that out on the next more on the way as well. But we hope y'all have a great night. And thank you so much for attending.
Good night, everyone.
thank you.
You're welcome. And
Thanks.
all my best to you, Mrs. Sandridge.
Thank you.